Hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to the second symposium session of the academic year 2014-15, although I cannot believe that we're in 2015 still. Today, it is our honor to have Professor Suzanne Wilson, who is the NEAG and DOG Professor of Teacher Education at the University of Connecticut. Prior to that, she served as chair and professor in the Department of Teacher Education at Michigan State University for 27 years. Dr. Wilson was the first director of the Teacher Assessment Project, which developed prototype assessments for the National Board for Professional Teaching Standards. While at MSU, she conducted research with the National Center for Research on Teacher Education, the Educational Policy and Practice Study, and the National Partnership for Excellence and Accountability in Teaching. She is the author of California Dreaming, Reforming Mathematics Education, and editor of Lee Schulman's collection of essays, Wisdom of Practice, Essays on Teaching, Learning, and Learning to Teach. Dr. Wilson serves on multiple editorial and advisory boards. She is also a member of the National Research Council's Board on Science Education and the National Academy of Education. Dr. Wilson's current work concerns developing measures of teacher knowledge for use in teacher education, professional development, and education research, as well as a study of the jurisdictional battles over who should control teacher education and licensure. She also was an invariant member of my dissertation committee, and that's my person. And I'm honored, I was always happy to have her, and we are honored to have her at the Kaput Center today. And thank you for coming here today. Thanks.
She could have given you a much better introduction, much more interesting introduction about
This is very interesting.
what's it like to work with Suzanne, but she was kind and stuck with the good stuff. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to be here, and it actually helped me a lot to try to work on this talk where I don't probably actually have an argument or a point. But I'm hoping that our discussion helps me get some clarity. This is a topic about which I care deeply, and I'm trying to figure out a way to get myself into the next book that I want to write. And so this issue about shifting conceptions of good teacher, what good teaching is central to that book. And so what I'm going to do is lay out some things that I'm thinking about. I hope people will interrupt me along the way. We have plenty of time. I can keep track of where I am and pick up, so it's not problematic for me to have people ask a question or say something in reaction or ask for clarification. So please feel free to do that. I'm going to start by with a backdrop on with different images of good teaching, and talk a little bit about how images of good teaching have shifted over time, but also how maybe they haven't shifted, or how there are some things that are quite similar across time in terms of how we think about good teachers in this country. And then I'm going to go into a second part of the talk where I'm going to lay out an array of different things that are going on right now in the national conversations about three areas: teacher preparation, professional development, and teacher evaluation, which I see as all faces on a prism of trying to understand what fundamentally are we thinking as a country about good teaching and the conception of good teaching. And at that point in time, I'm actually going to ask you to talk to one another and think about that, so that it can be a little bit more dialogic about how you think we're thinking nationally, or within this state, or within your different contexts about what it means to be a good teacher. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about how I've been thinking about some of that, or some of the things that I've noticed about the discourse of good teachers good teaching right now, and some of my emergent understanding about why this language, why these ideas, why now. And then I'm going to end on this sort of so what point, why would this matter, and I'm just going to talk about why it matters to me. I'm not going to begin to understand why it might matter to anybody else, or make a claim that I know why it might matter to anybody else. So that's the general frame. Backdrop, what's going on right now, how does all of that suggest ideas about how we think about good teaching, and then a little bit of low-level analysis about why is this going on and how might we think about this as teacher educators, as people who work in professional development, and as scholars who are trying to produce relevant and usable knowledge. So you can read along with me. Here's some advertisements for teachers. Here's one from 1772, wanted immediately, a sober, diligent schoolmaster capable of teaching reading, writing, arithmetic, and the Latin tongue. Now you might think sober there is figurative, but as it turns out, alcohol plays a large role in advertisements for teaching in the 1800s. Here, God seems, this is one of my favorites as a woman, God seems to have made women peculiarly suited to guide and develop the infant mind, and it seems very poor policy to pay a man $20 or $22 a month for teaching children the ABCs when a female could do the work more successfully at 1/3 of the price. From 1905, this is from a teacher's contract in Iowa. Teachers are expected to live in the community in which they're employed, to take residence with local citizens. It's understood that they'll attend church on Sunday. Male teachers may take one night each week for courting purposes, or 2 evenings a week if they go to church regularly. Women teachers will not marry or keep company with a man friend during the week except as an escort to church services. Women teachers who marry or engage in other unseemly conduct will be dismissed. Any teacher who smokes cigarettes, again, uses liquor in any form, frequents a pool or public hall, or for men, gets shaved in a barbershop, or for women, bobs her hair, has dyed hair, or wears short skirts, and has undue use of cosmetics will not be tolerated under any circumstances. Loitering in those evil places called ice cream parlors and drugstores, etc., is prohibited. So these are descriptions. Now we laugh at them. 100 years from now, people are going to laugh at our descriptions. These are the first part of my sort of frame is to suggest that we have a dominant conception of teaching that is in the mainstream of our national character for any age, that dominant conception is shaped both by our assumptions about who we want children to become as people in the world, and by larger intellectual, political, cultural, social, and economic forces that go well beyond issues that have to do specifically with school. This is not a new claim. So for instance, in the 1850s, teachers were portrayed and asked to be morally upright, nurturing, and sufficiently educated. They were also supposed to, very importantly, be agents and models of Americanization for those waves of immigrants who were coming from different countries and did not know how to be an appropriate American. In the 1860s to the 1950s, there was a big movement among the African American community to have teachers be models and agents of racial uplift. There was a rise in the unionization. This is when teachers' unions began to matter in the country, largely not because of teaching so much, but because of the efforts on the part of progressives to address issues of social justice and especially poverty in the cities, where there was a great deal of poverty associated with things like the Industrial Revolution and shifts in the American economy. And Dewey, I'm presuming everyone has memorized Dewey because that is part of our socialization, but the progressive ideology of good teachers build bridges between the curriculum and the child, sort of have a bifocal view and do not elevate the content over the child. They develop in students the capacity to be critical thinkers because we want them to participate in the democracy in full ways, and they too are going to try to help use those skills toward to social ends, to the social good. From the 1930s to the 1960s, reflecting then again issues that were happening in American society, there turns out, especially during the civil rights movement and for efforts for desegregation, that the schools became places where there were tensions between the white teachers in the schools and the communities that those schools taught. These kinds of tensions still are part of our national landscape because the teaching force remains largely white, even in the face of pretty